Hello, everybody. Welcome to this research talk that's part of the streaming goals of twitch.tv/Dr. Gameology, YouTube, and Facebook Gaming. Welcome. So we are talking about the myth of addictive personality, what that means when people say it to counselors and psychologists, and what counselors and psychologists think about when people say it to us. I think there's a lot of confusion about this idea, and I just thought I would take some time during the stream to make a little resource about it. So let's get to it and have a few minutes lingering on some important ideas here. So first off, this comes from an article published in the Global Journal of Addiction and Rehabilitation Medicine, and it's from one of my friends and collaborators, Mark Griffiths. We are able to work together through the DSM task force looking at gaming disorder and other games related issues. And Mark has published hundreds, if not thousands of articles, it seems, on different process addictions, including gambling and video games and other technologies. So he is a fascinating person to get to talk with about these topics and has a very specific goal with his research agenda and has hundreds of people every year want to talk with him about the addictive personality. And so this article is an opinion piece where he reviews some of the research on personality and addiction and whether or not it is possible to look at personality type and say that there are specific personalities more prone to falling victim to addiction than others. Now, the ideas here may seem a little bit biased to people who are not mental health counselors or people who are not psychology researchers, or could be biased for people who are not struggling with addiction themselves. So the idea in this article, and I included the quote in italics at the top left, fundamentally the idea of a general addictive personality is a myth. Now, that quote makes a lot of people have very strong feelings. And as a counselor myself, I work with people who come to me saying, I have this addiction and I don't have the ability to control myself in different situations. I have an addictive personality. If something is addictive or is fun at an extreme level, I will consume it and I will lose control of myself because of my personality in that situation. Now, when Dr. Mark Griffiths talks about this and says that it is a myth, what he is saying is not that people's personalities do not do this to them. What he's saying is that the construct of what personality is in research experiments doesn't actually support that statement. Now, what is the difference between the personality that I have inside of me, you as the viewer have inside you, and people in all these studies have inside them, versus what something like a DSM-5 manual says about personality and disorders of the personality? Those are two very different things. And so the confusion here is that personality is the thing in us that organizes our traits and tendencies into predictable and reliable patterns that interact with all the range of different situations we find ourselves interacting with day to day, month to month, year to year, from beginning to the end of our life. And so when we create a structure in a research design about what is a personality related disorder, that is different than saying what is a personality. And because we're trying to find a statistically significant connection between the personality of the individual and the problem, where the personality is the most critical element of that problem existing, which is not what people that say they have an addictive personality are actually trying to communicate. So if you look at the list of letters above my head right here, and then you also look at the list of 5 personality features on the right: neuroticism, extroversion, openness, agreeableness, and conscientiousness, what you will find is different kinds of fun or behavioral activities connect with different traits of our personality at different levels, especially things that are technological. But at the end of the day, things that are meant to be rewarding should feel rewarding Things that are not designed to be rewarding and are more mundane, people might do because of responsibility, motivation, or obligation, but might not necessarily experience a fun surrounding it. And so, again, this might sound confusing because it is. For something to be considered an addiction, it needs to have a series of consistent experiences for the person, consequences of being a part of the activity, and it needs to create difficulties across multiple life areas in a predictable and consistent way. So if you look at the small circles orbiting around the big circle of addiction, we have things like mood modification, conflict, withdrawal, the threat of relapse, losing control of the structure of your day. If something does that to you, we can start to consider whether it's an addiction or not. This slide in and of itself could be a lot more conversation, but for the sake of time, we're going to keep moving. And now we have a brain here, and you're going to see several brain areas that are involved in the reward response pathways of the brain. I've listed a few in the text on the slide, and for the dopaminergic pathway, we have things like the ventral tegmental area, the nucleus accumbens, and the prefrontal cortex. Now, for dopamine to be a part of an experience, it's going to create a sense of motivation, pleasure. We won't want to give up. We're going to keep pursuing the reward experience. It could lead to compulsive behavior as well. And so this is the pathway in our brain that activates when we have fun doing something and activates when we experience pleasure, and that pleasure becomes a reward. So at the end of this conversation, and of course, there is a lengthier presentation inside everything we just talked about today, but ultimately, addiction is a specific term. And when you use that word, especially with a researcher or a psychologist, they're going to go into this ultra serious checklist of things and question, does it do this? Does it do that? When all you're saying is, when I see an opportunity to do that thing, I'm going to drop what I'm doing and I'm going to go after it because I know it will be fun, relaxing, enjoyable, and pleasurable. Also, personality, same thing. You use that word and it means so many things to so many different people. We need more information. The reason the idea of an addictive personality ends up being a myth for some and being the thing that describes their existence for others is that these are two very different types of people trying to communicate about something, and the words being used mean something very specific to one and is more of a general plea for help from the others. I wish both sides could start speaking the same language, but it just doesn't seem, the more and more that I do what I do as Dr. Gameology, like that is a future that is very imminent. But that's the goal, is for people to learn what personality is and to talk about how it influences our motivation, to enjoy things, have fun, and to change the way we experience our day. And after all, if we do that, then we can find ourselves in the activities, keep them in a balanced model of how we want to live our life, and enjoy being ourselves as we continue the journey. That's our research talk for today. I hope it gave you something to think about. I've enjoyed presenting it for you. If you had a good experience thinking about these things, please go ahead and hit follow, subscribe, like, share, whatever it is to help me spread the message and turn the Dr. Gameology channels into a force for good for the people who enjoy video games and the people who love them as well. And this is Dr. Gameology. Let's get back to Final Fantasy XIV, and thank you so much for listening.